I retired at 60, thinking I had finally bought myself the one thing I'd been chasing all along. Time. Time to fix everything I'd broken. Time to be the father and husband I'd promised I'd be. I walked into that family dinner with a smile, convinced this was the first page of my redemption. Then my daughter looked at me. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth and said the 7 words that cut deeper than any layoff, any market crash, any professional humiliation. "It's 30 years too late, Dad." Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was flat, almost tired, as if she'd said it to herself 1,000 times already. And in that moment, I realized something I had refused to see my entire life. Retirement doesn't rewind the clock. Money can't buy back birthdays, graduations, bedtime stories, or the kind of trust that disappears quietly year after year until you stop noticing it's gone. I sat there, frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the table, my mind racing back to every excuse I'd ever made, every next quarter, every just one more project, every promise I thought I'd keep when the timing was right. What came next wasn't applause for finally stepping away from the corner office. It was silence. The kind that tells you you're no longer the hero of the story. And that night, for the first time in my life, I wondered if it was possible to rebuild a family that had already learned to live without me. I remember the day I signed the biggest deal of my career. It was the kind of contract that got your name printed in glossy trade magazines, the kind of deal CEOs told their board about to prove the company's future was secured. I'd been chasing it for 2 years, losing weekends, holidays, and more hours of sleep than I could count. When the final signature was on the page, my colleagues clapped, champagne corks popped, and my phone buzzed with congratulatory messages. This is it, I thought. One last mountain. Then I can finally stop climbing. Retirement was right around the corner, and I pictured my wife smiling when I told her we'd have all the time in the world now. I imagined my daughter's face when I promised I'd be there for everything I'd missed. As I shook hands with the client, my phone buzzed again. I pulled it out, expecting another congratulations text. Instead, it was from my daughter. "Dad, I can't make it to dinner tonight. Finals. And I don't think you should come to graduation either. It's complicated." The words didn't land right away. I pocketed the phone, finished the celebration, and told myself she was just stressed. But the truth dug in on the drive home. My retirement wouldn't erase the years I'd missed. My absence had become her normal. At home, my wife was already in bed when I walked in. There was no champagne waiting, no late-night toast to the future. Just the quiet hum of the dishwasher and a note on the counter. Dinner's in the fridge. In those early years, I thought we were a team. She cheered me on when I stayed late, promised we'd travel once things settled. She kept the house running, the bills paid, the holidays festive. But somewhere along the way, she stopped asking when I'd be home. She stopped making plans that included me. Our daughter adapted even faster. When she was little, she'd wait by the window for me to come home, waving drawings she'd made at school. By the time she was in middle school, she stopped waiting. By high school, she stopped asking if I'd come at all. I told myself she was independent, strong, just like me. I didn't see that it was resignation, not resilience. One evening, during what I thought was a rare family dinner, I tried to start a conversation. "So," I asked, "how's school going?" "It's fine," she said without looking up from her plate. "Fine good? Or fine just fine?" I tried again, forcing a smile. She shrugged. "You don't need to worry about it." That landed heavier than I expected. It wasn't irritation. It was distance. the kind that comes when someone has learned not to expect you to care. I clung to the belief that financial stability meant emotional stability. We had a beautiful house, 2 cars, and no debt. I thought that was proof I'd done my job as a husband and father. What I didn't realize was that I had confused providing with being present. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. My wife started taking weekend trips with her friends, and I'd nod, distracted by whatever report was on my laptop. My daughter stopped inviting me to her soccer games. I assumed she'd lost interest in the sport, only to discover later she'd been named captain. The real twist came one Sunday afternoon. I'd wrapped up an earnings call earlier than expected and came home to surprise them. The house was filled with laughter, hers and my daughter's, coming from the backyard. For a moment I felt warm, imagining myself stepping outside and joining them. But when I opened the sliding door, the laughter stopped. Not because they were angry, but because my presence was unexpected. It was as if I'd interrupted a scene I wasn't meant to be in. That was the day it hit me. My family had built a rhythm that didn't include me, and I couldn't decide if that was their failure or mine. I told myself it was temporary. Once I retired, we'd all go back to how it used to be. We'd travel, have long dinners, maybe even spend a summer by the lake. I convinced myself they were just waiting for the moment I could finally give them my full attention. But deep down, I wondered, what if they'd stopped waiting years ago? I used to think silence meant peace. At the office, silence in a meeting meant I'd made my point. At home, silence at the dinner table felt like everyone was simply tired. But after I retired, I realized it was a different kind of silence. One made of distance, not comfort. My wife had her own routines now. She took yoga every Tuesday, volunteered at the community garden on Thursdays, and spent weekends on short trips with friends. It wasn't avoidance. It was her life. A life she'd built while I was climbing corporate ladders. "Want to come with me to the market?" I asked one Saturday morning, thinking it would be a simple way to reconnect. She didn't even look up from tying her shoes. "I'm meeting Linda. We have our system. You'd be bored." It wasn't cold. It wasn't unkind. It was simply true. She'd grown so used to handling life without me that my presence felt like an interruption to a rhythm I hadn't earned a place in. Our daughter was no different. In college, she built what she called her real family among friends, professors, and coworkers. I first heard the phrase at a small awards ceremony. She was receiving recognition for a research project, and as she thanked her mentors, she smiled at her professor. "He's been like a real father to me," she said, her voice full of warmth. The audience clapped, but my chest tightened. My hands felt heavy. She wasn't trying to wound me. It was just her truth. I clapped along with everyone else, wearing a polite smile, wondering when exactly I'd been replaced. Back at home, I tried to bring it up. "You spoke highly of Professor Anderson today," she shrugged. "Yeah, he's been there for me. You know, in ways you couldn't be." The words weren't angry. They weren't cruel. They were simple, factual, and they cut deeper than any outburst could have. I wish I could say that moment drove me to action. But the truth is, I filed it away like I did every warning. Another, "I'll deal with it later." The missed opportunities. My wife had tried over the years. There was the dinner when she set down her fork and said, "Mark, I can't keep doing this alone." I told her we just needed to get through the next quarter. She asked if I'd consider counseling. I said we'd talk about it after my next trip. Even my daughter tried when she was younger. One day, years ago, she left a note on my desk. The paper was folded neatly, her handwriting round and careful. I wish you could come to my play. I saved you a seat in the front row. I remember finding it late at night after a meeting. I smiled, touched, and tucked it into the top drawer of my desk. I told myself I'd write her back, maybe even surprise her by showing up. I didn't. The letter stayed there, under stacks of quarterly reports, business cards, and old meeting notes. After I retired, I went through my office at home, sorting through years of work I no longer needed. That's when I found it. The paper was brittle now, the ink faded. Her words were still there, but the little heart she'd drawn in the corner had almost disappeared. When I mentioned it to her later, trying to laugh about how I'd kept it all these years, she just looked puzzled. "I wrote you a letter?" she asked, genuinely confused. I realized she'd long since forgotten the moment, probably because she'd stopped expecting an answer. The thing about missed opportunities is that they don't vanish. They pile up quietly, becoming the walls you one day find yourself standing outside of. My wife and daughter hadn't slammed the door on me. They'd just built new rooms without me in them. There were dinners I could have joined but chose the office instead. Trips I could have taken but postponed for work. Moments when they were silently asking, "Will you choose us this time?" And I kept answering without realizing it. Not yet. Now, retired and supposedly free, I found myself looking through a window at a life that was still moving, just not toward me. It's strange. People think regret hits you like a storm, sudden and violent. But mine came like fog. It crept in, soft and quiet, until one day I realized I couldn't see my family clearly anymore. And the worst part? I wasn't sure they could see me either. Retirement was supposed to be the reset button. After decades of 12-hour days and red-eye flights, I stepped away from the firm at 60. My colleagues gave me a standing ovation. My name was etched onto a plaque in the lobby. I shook hands, smiled for photos, and thought to myself, now I can finally do what really matters. To mark the occasion, I planned a family dinner. Not just a casual meal, but a formal evening, reservations at their favorite restaurant, the one I'd always been too busy to go to. I pictured us laughing, sharing stories, mapping out trips we'd take now that I was free. The restaurant was warm with soft lighting. My wife arrived in a simple black dress, elegant but reserved. My daughter came straight from work, her hair pulled back, wearing the kind of professional outfit that made her look older than I wanted to admit. We ordered. We made small talk about the food, the weather, the parking. I cleared my throat and raised my glass. "I know I've missed a lot," I began, "but I'm here now. I've retired early so I can finally give my time to the people who matter most. Us, our family." I expected relief, maybe even applause. What I got was silence. Then my daughter set down her fork. She looked at me, her eyes calm, her voice steady. "It's 30 years too late, Dad." It wasn't anger. It wasn't bitterness. It was a statement of fact, delivered without heat, like she'd rehearsed it quietly for years. My chest tightened. I tried to swallow, but my mouth felt dry. I glanced at my wife, searching for backup. She looked down at her napkin. I managed to say, "That's not fair. I worked hard so we could have a good life." My daughter's lips curved into a sad half-smile. "We had a life, Dad. You just weren't in it." The reckoning. What came next wasn't a single explosion, but a slow unspooling of years of unspoken words. My wife went first. "You missed our anniversary 3 years in a row. I stopped buying gifts because there was no point." My daughter leaned forward. "You missed my high school graduation. You said you'd make it up to me when I graduated college. And then you missed that too. I sent a gift, I said weakly. She nodded. Yeah, a pen set. You know who was there in person? Professor Anderson, my boss, my friends' parents, people who didn't owe me anything. The list kept coming. Soccer championships, school plays, holidays, the Christmas I'd promised to take them to Aspen, canceled at the last minute for an emergency meeting. The birthdays I joined by phone, my voice cutting in and out over conference call static. It was like they were reciting a ledger, only the balance was years of absence. I tried to defend myself. I was building our future. I thought, that was the problem, Dad. My daughter cut in, her voice firm now. It was always about the future, never the present. I felt something break inside me, but I still clung to the hope that I could explain. If I'd known, she shook her head. You did know. You just didn't choose us. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. She took a sip of water, set the glass down carefully, and said, Do you remember when I had my art exhibition in my junior year? I searched my memory, panicked. I couldn't recall it. I'm sorry, I don't think I knew about it. You did, she said. I emailed you an invitation. I even wrote, This matters to me. I felt a surge of guilt rise in my throat. I never saw that email. She gave a small, hollow laugh. Of course you didn't. You were using your work account. Your assistant told me your inbox was full. I guess my invitation got buried under quarterly reports. Her words were sharp, but her tone wasn't. That almost made it worse. I sat there, feeling every missed moment like a weight pressing down on my chest. I wanted to tell her I would have been there if I'd seen it. I wanted to promise I'd make it right. But how do you make up for an empty gallery wall and the look on her face when she realized I wasn't coming? For the first time that night, I had no defense. The dinner ended quietly. No shouting, no tears, just an unshakable understanding that my absence wasn't an accident. It was a choice I'd made over and over again. On the drive home, my wife looked out the window, the city lights reflecting off the glass. My daughter sat in the back, scrolling through her phone, as if the conversation had already been filed away under settled matters. When we pulled into the driveway, my wife said softly, We learned to live without you, Mark. Don't expect that to change overnight. Her words lingered long after the car went silent. I had retired to start over. Instead, I'd walked into a life that had moved on without me. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every shrug, every quiet answer, every empty chair I hadn't noticed until it was too late. And for the first time, I wondered if there was a way back at all, or if the door had quietly closed decades ago, and I was just now hearing the latch click. I woke up the morning after that dinner with a strange mix of determination and dread. The message was clear. My family didn't believe me, and why should they? I'd spent 3 decades proving that my promises had an expiration date. Over the following weeks, old colleagues called. Consulting offers, speaking engagements, a position on an advisory board for a Fortune 500 company. Each one came with flattering words and lucrative checks. I appreciate it, I told them, but I'm stepping away for good. On paper, it looked like a noble choice. In reality, it was terrifying. My career had been my identity. Walking away wasn't just giving up income. It was giving up the thing I'd been good at, the place I'd mattered. One afternoon, I told my wife over coffee, I've turned them all down. No more travel, no more late nights. I'm done for good. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. You said that 10 years ago when you stepped back from the partner track, and 6 months later, you were gone every weekend again. Her words weren't sharp, they were factual, and that stung more than anger. I mean it this time, I said quietly. She nodded, but there was no relief in her eyes. Then show me, don't just say it. The uphill battle. I thought quitting my career was the hard part. It wasn't. The hard part was proving that my absence from the office wasn't going to be replaced with a different kind of absence at home. I started small. I made dinner a priority. Every night I was at the table, even if no one talked much. I offered to help with errands. I asked about their days, careful not to push. My daughter was polite but cautious. When I texted to see if she wanted lunch, sometimes she'd agree. More often, she'd cancel last minute. Something came up at work, Dad. The first few times, I felt a flash of frustration. But then I realized what she was doing. She was testing me. She'd grown up with a father who canceled at the last second. She wanted to see if I'd do the same when the tables turned. So I didn't push back. I simply replied, "No problem. Rain check?" And I meant it. One Saturday, she invited me to a small art fair where she was volunteering. I showed up on time, bought a coffee, and wandered the booths. She wasn't there. I texted her, "Hey, I'm here at the entrance." 5 minutes later, she replied, "Sorry, Dad. Something came up. Can we do this another time?" I stared at the message, the hum of the fair buzzing around me. It would have been easy to take it as rejection. But I stayed. I walked the booths. I bought a piece of local art I thought she'd like. That night, I sent her a photo of it hanging in the hallway. She didn't reply until the next day. "Looks good." Just 2 words, but it was more than I'd gotten in years. Weeks passed. My wife still moved in her own orbit, but I noticed subtle changes. She started leaving the mail for me to sort, instead of handling it herself. She asked if I wanted to join her for her Saturday market trip. At dinner one night, she said, "You've been consistent." I told you I would be. She studied me for a moment. I'm not ready to believe it's permanent, but I'm noticing. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was the first crack in the wall. My daughter's tests continued. A text inviting me to lunch, then radio silence. A call to join her at a gallery, then a last-minute cancellation. Each time I responded with patience. Finally, she called on a Tuesday evening. "Dad, there's a small event at the college Thursday night. You can come if you want, but it's not a big deal." "I'll be there," I said. She didn't cancel. I showed up early, sat quietly in the back, and watched her present a project. She didn't acknowledge me during the talk, but afterward she walked over. "You stayed the whole time?" she asked. "Of course," I said. She nodded slowly. "You didn't even check your phone once." "I left it in the car." For the first time in a long while, her smile wasn't polite. It was small, tentative, but real. That night, as I drove home, I realized something. My gamble wasn't about grand gestures. It wasn't about quitting my job or making big promises. It was about showing up, over and over again, until they believed I'd keep doing it. And for the first time since retirement, I thought maybe, just maybe, they were starting to believe me. Healing didn't arrive like a sunrise. There was no single moment when everything was suddenly warm and bright again. It came in tiny increments, barely noticeable at first, like drops of water filling a cracked glass. My daughter started replying to my texts faster. Not instantly, but within hours instead of days. Sometimes the messages were short. Busy, Dad, or can't talk now. But they were responses, and that was something. One Sunday, she called me. It wasn't for anything big, just to ask if I knew a good place to get her car serviced. I gave her a recommendation, and she said, "Thanks, Dad." It was a small sentence, but the way she said it, the lack of hesitation in the word Dad, made me realize it was the first time in years she'd said it without a wall between us. My wife noticed, too. One evening, while we were cleaning up after dinner, she asked, "Would you want to take a short trip? Just a few days. Somewhere quiet." I almost said yes too quickly, afraid she'd change her mind. "Of course," I said carefully. We decided on a cabin near the lake, a place we'd always talked about visiting but never had the time. She even suggested inviting our daughter to join for a day or two. To my surprise, she agreed. The first day was quiet but comfortable. We cooked together, took walks by the water. My daughter arrived on the second day, carrying her laptop and a tote bag full of files. "You're still working?" I teased lightly. She smiled faintly. "Just a few things. Won't take long." I didn't push it. I remembered how defensive I'd get when anyone questioned my schedule. That evening, we sat around a small fire pit. My wife went inside to get more blankets, leaving just the two of us outside. "It's nice here," my daughter said, staring at the flames. "I always thought we'd spend more time like this," I admitted. She glanced at me, then looked away. "Me too." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. The next morning, she got a phone call. I watched her face change as she listened. She packed her laptop into her bag before she even hung up. "Something came up at work," she said. "I have to head back." I felt a pang in my chest, not because she was leaving, but because I recognized the urgency in her voice. It was the same urgency that had pulled me away from them countless times. "Okay," I said gently. She hesitated. "You're not mad?" "No," I said. "I just hope you're not learning my worst habits." She laughed softly. "Don't worry, Dad. I'm not you." I smiled, but it was bittersweet, because I knew how easy it was to say that at her age, and how hard it was to live it later. The new family dynamic weeks later, she invited me to a small dinner at her apartment. It was nothing fancy. Takeout boxes, a bottle of wine, her tiny kitchen table. At one point, she asked about my early years at the firm. Was it always that intense? Or did you just let it take over? I could have told her the convenient version, that it was the industry, the clients, the competition. But I'd promised myself I'd stop hiding behind excuses. "It wasn't just the job," I said. "It was me. I liked winning. I liked being the guy everyone needed. And I told myself it was for the family, but the truth is, I didn't know how to stop." She didn't say anything at first. She just listened, and in her silence, I saw the younger version of her, the one who used to wait by the window for me to come home. "I don't want you to end up like me," I said quietly. "I want you to be successful, but I want you to have someone to celebrate with when you are, and that means not making the same trade-offs I did." For a moment, I thought she'd brush it off. Instead, she stood, walked around the table, and hugged me. It wasn't the polite, obligatory hug of holidays. It was tight, real, almost like she was holding on to something she didn't want to lose. "I'll try," she said. "But if I fail, you have to be here. You can't disappear again." I felt my throat tighten. "I'll be here," I said, "no matter what." And for the first time in decades, I believed myself. And I think she did too. In the months after that night at my daughter's apartment, I started to notice something new. It wasn't that my family had completely forgiven me. That kind of healing takes years. But they no longer looked at me like someone they needed to protect themselves from. One morning, I was invited to speak at a small business networking event. The organizer said, "We want you to talk about leadership, career success, what you learned over your decades in finance." I almost prepared the same old playbook: strategies for negotiation, lessons in risk management. But when I stood on that stage, looking out at a room full of young professionals, something in me shifted. "I could tell you about the deals I closed," I began. "I could tell you about the promotions, the strategies, the wins. But here's the truth. None of that matters if you come home to an empty table." The room went still. "I spent 30 years chasing success," I continued. "And I got it. But the price was missing my daughter's graduations, my wife's anniversaries, entire chapters of my own life. I thought I could make it up later. But there is no later. There's only now." When the talk ended, there was polite applause. I walked off stage thinking maybe I'd said too much. A week later, I got an email. It was from a young man in the audience, a mid-level manager at a tech firm. "Mr. Harris," it began, "I wanted to thank you. After hearing your story, I canceled a work trip to attend my wife's ultrasound. We've been fighting for months, and I thought we were past saving. But that night, she told me she believes we still have a chance. I think you might have saved my marriage. Thank you for not sugarcoating your mistakes." I sat there reading the email twice, maybe 3 times. I'd spent a lifetime thinking my value was in deals and numbers. Now, it seemed my greatest contribution might be in warning others not to follow my path. The ripple effect. My relationship with my daughter kept evolving. We still had awkward moments, and I still had to fight the urge to overcompensate. But the distance was gone. One afternoon, she came over for coffee. She looked nervous, which wasn't like her. "I have something to tell you," she said. I braced myself, half expecting bad news. "I'm getting married," she said. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Not because I was surprised she'd found someone, but because I realized she wanted me to know. "That's incredible," I said finally. "Who's the lucky person?" She told me about him. His name, his patience, the way he listened to her without trying to solve everything. And then she said, "I want you to be there, Dad. I want you to walk me down the aisle." I felt something in my chest loosen. I nodded, trying not to let my voice shake. I'd be honored. The wedding day came faster than I expected. It was a small ceremony, nothing flashy. My wife was there, looking radiant in a dress that matched the season. My daughter stood at the front, beautiful and composed, waiting for me. As I took her arm, I whispered, "You look amazing." She smiled. "Don't cry, Dad. It's just a wedding." But my vision was already blurring. We walked slowly, each step feeling like a gift I hadn't earned, but had been given anyway. At the altar, I handed her to her future husband. As I turned to step aside, she caught my hand. "Stay here," she whispered. During the reception, she stood to make her speech. She thanked her husband, her friends, her mentors. Then she paused, looking at me. "I want to thank someone else," she said. "My dad. I know you think it's too late for a lot of things. But Dad." She smiled. "Today isn't one of them." The room went silent. Then the applause came, warm and overwhelming. I felt tears in my eyes, not from guilt this time, but from a deep gratitude that defied words. Later that night, as the music played and people danced, my daughter found me again. "You did it," she said. "Did what?" I asked. You stayed, she said. All this time you stayed. That's all I ever wanted. And in that moment, I realized something important. The legacy I was leaving wasn't in bank accounts or business achievements. It was in the choice I made, again and again, to be there. I still get calls from old colleagues. Sometimes they ask for advice on deals. More often they ask about balance, about marriage, about the moments they're afraid of missing. I tell them the same thing every time. Don't wait until you retire to choose your family. By then, they might have learned to live without you. I don't say it to scare them. I say it because it's the truth, and because sometimes the truth is the only thing that can change someone's path. And if sharing mine spares even one person from standing at an empty table 30 years from now, then maybe all those years of mistakes weren't entirely wasted.